Story 1. I am a 25-year-old woman, and I bought my own 3-bedroom house last year after working full-time and saving up, which was a huge accomplishment for me. One room is mine, one is my study, and the third is a guest room, which was meant for actual guests like people who would stay for a weekend and then leave. Life was going pretty well until I got a random call from my cousin Tasha, who is 27 years old. A little background. Tasha has always been a bit of a handful, even when we were kids. Constant drama, always lying, stealing small things, and blaming others. My mom once said Tasha could smash a glass and somehow make it someone else's fault. As we got older, the rumors about her got worse. She was seen going around town with questionable individuals, partying often, and possibly using substances. Nothing was ever confirmed, but nobody was surprised either. We barely talk unless it's at a family event, and even then, I keep it short. So, we were on the phone, and after 2 minutes of forced small talk, she casually mentioned she broke up with her boyfriend and figured she would just stay at my place for a while, like a few months, just until she could get things together. She said it like she was inviting herself to dinner. No, please, no, do you mind, just a matter of fact, I'll be there. I said no. Politely, at first. I told her the guest room wasn't meant for long-term stays and that I needed peace and quiet to work from home. That's when she started getting unpleasant. She said I was acting all high and mighty just because I bought a house, as if that somehow made me better than everyone else. Still, I stood my ground. A few days later, one of my aunts, not even Tasha's mom, just one of those older relatives who always tries to play the peacemaker, called me and said, "You know, it wouldn't hurt to help her out. She's still family." I told her plainly that I've seen Tasha move in with people before. It's never just a few months. She brings drama, a suitcase full of poor choices, and she never leaves unless someone threatens legal action. So, no, I'm not doing it. I work too hard for my peace and my space to hand it over to someone who has always been a source of trouble. She can figure it out, just not in my house. Story 2. This story happened a few years ago while working in a kitchen in the city I live in. My boss was your typical lonely drunk. Creepy compliments to the staff and inappropriate conversations with them as well. Abusive to anyone working under him, and a lack of respect to other management when he felt he was above them. He ended most nights by disappearing during the dinner rush and slamming a 24 of beer by himself at home. My friend and I worked Tuesday to Saturday close shifts every day for a year. We became best friends through the suffering of this man's abuse. We could never do a good job in his eyes. Nothing was ever clean enough or good enough for him. He had this opinion that we never tried hard enough, and we must be slacking off when he's not there. He decided the solution to his problem was to assign us extra cleaning. Since most everything was already perfectly clean, he decided to ask us for 2 things. Scrub the grout between the tiles and clean the foam ceiling inserts with soap and water. These had to be completed, or we were going to get written up. The next day rolls around and things are not as clean as usual for the close, since I was on my hands and knees scrubbing the tiles all night. Boss man took this as a personal attack and unloaded on us. I proceeded to explain that scrubbing it isn't getting it any cleaner, and there's nothing I can do. I also showed him the one tile that came out of the floor. He grabs a butter knife and cuts all the grout out around one tile. It was black and crumbled and filled with oil. I tried explaining and showing him that he was going to ruin the floor, but it fell on deaf ears. After proving to himself it was possible by completely removing a tile, he told us it had to be done by the end of the week. Here's the malicious compliance. Despite me telling him that it wasn't working, he insisted he was right. I told him many times it would ruin the floor, and he didn't listen. So that night I spent a few hours doing exactly as he showed me, until there was a large portion of the floor with loose tiles. He was disappointed that only got about 1 square meter of flooring done, and wanted the rest done by the end of the day. Commercial kitchens are huge, and these tiles are small, so I decided to focus on the main line where everyone works. I got about 75% of the main working area degrouted in 2 days and left the loose tiles in their place. The floors in professional kitchens are designed to drain water in a specific direction and be smooth enough to clear all debris when swept. Since the tiles were all loose in the floor, sweeping and mopping only pushed dirt and brown water into the holes where the grout used to be. Upper management came in to work for the weekend, and they all had to stand on this wet, stinky mess of tiles that was hard to balance on. It wasn't long before they asked what was wrong with the floor. Instead of saying that he made a mistake and asked us to do exactly that, he blamed us on the spot, saying he would never clean a floor like that and we must be stupid liars. I never got around to soaking the foam ceiling boards, sadly, since I guess he realized how stupid it was. I never got any petty revenge either. I left feeling like bad people truly do just get away with being bad people. Skip to 6 months after I had left the company. I get a message from a friend who worked there as well. She explained that she had written a letter to Human Resources detailing this man's abuse and weird inappropriate comments to her and others in the workplace and in private. She mentioned she had included some things I had told her. He was fired on the spot. No discussion or chance to prove himself. I'm not sure if they already knew he was like this, or maybe they just knew that no one would make up a 2-page 5-paragraph letter about him for no reason. He left the country immediately after losing his job and filled his social media with photos of him in suits with captions like "Heart of Gold." I still resent this man but enjoy thinking about this story from time to time. Story 3. I work for a nonprofit organization. We own an office building and rent office spaces out to other nonprofits at a very cheap rate, though we currently have one for-profit tenant, the tax man. The offices have been a little crowded as we have increased staff size this past year, so how the building is set up, everyone entering has to come directly through my office to get anywhere else in the building. Rather annoying for me, but oh well. It is rather obvious upon entering my office which organization I work for. I have signs and tons of paraphernalia pertaining to my organization. Well, the tax man is rarely in his office as this is his secondary location. So typically when his clients come in and see he is not there, they'll simply ask me to place a piece of paper on his desk for them or some similar small task. This one client of the tax man, entitled Cow, comes in rather often. But, being the entitled cow she is, she speaks down to me and gives me many tasks to do. For example, she once came in, discovered the tax man wasn't in his office, and started rambling off to me. "I need you to give this to the tax man. Tell him that I didn't know what to put in X section and I have another question about X, so I need you to have him call me immediately." I politely responded, "Ma'am, I don't work for the tax man. I work for the nonprofit organization which owns this building. But if you would like to write down your notes for him, I would be happy to place the message on his desk for you." "What an incompetent employee you are," she stated as she stormed off. This began happening rather frequently, at least every other week. Each time, I would remind her that I do not work for the tax man, and I would often note that I have no idea what she's talking about. Each time she would insult me and leave. The last time she came in, about 2 weeks ago, she walked right up to me and said, "What do you even do all day? Watch Netflix. Your job is boring." I, politely as possible, said, "No ma'am, I run a youth volunteer program, run a county-wide volunteer center, do all the accounting for the organization, serve as a property manager," and listed off my very extensive job description to her. She laughed and said, "Yay right. My daughter is about your age, and she just sits at a desk all day watching Netflix. You can tell your boss whatever you want, but I know you don't do anything." What an entitled cow, right? Well, today, about 30 minutes ago, guess who waltzed into my office? That's right, the oh-so-lovely entitled cow. I told her that the tax man is in, but he's currently meeting with someone else, and she could go knock to let him know she is there. She stared at me for a moment, before finally leaving my office and walking back to the tax man's. 5 minutes later, she walked back into my office and said, "It sounds like he's meeting with somebody." "Yes, ma'am, that's what I just told you." Well, I'm not knocking and letting him know I'm here. You're his receptionist, that's your job. No, ma'am, I am not his receptionist, and as I have told you many times before, I do not work for his company. You can either wait back there until his meeting is over, or you can knock and let him know you are here. Either way, it doesn't affect me. Are you kidding me? I'm here for a meeting with him, which was supposed to start 5 minutes ago. I ignored her and she walked out, only to pop her head in 2 seconds later and say, "Seriously, I'm not knocking." I said, "Okay," and she walked back to his office to wait. It's a small building, and I can hear everything that happens in the hallways, so I can currently hear her sitting outside his office mumbling, "Seriously, tax man, finish your meeting. You're supposed to meet with me. Frick your incompetent receptionist." Frick me, the incompetent receptionist of the tax man who just watches Netflix all day, right? Story 4. Most of you know me, but for those who don't, here is a brief backstory. I am a 33-year-old woman, and I work as a double-registered nurse for a local clinic during the day and the emergency room overnight. I'm married with 3 children. Now, on with the post. It was an ordinary day at the clinic. There wasn't much going on since Kevin just dealing with the usual patient concerns: coughing, sneezing, or minor bodily injuries. A young man, let's call him Todd, entered with his service dog, a beautiful border collie. Naturally, the dog brought out all the ladies in the office, myself included. My administrative assistant, nicknamed Nicole, greeted the patient with her regular script and asked the young man what brought him in. He had come in because he wasn't feeling well. Nicole got him started with the paperwork while myself, the medical assistant, and the radiology technician were all doting on this sweet fur baby. While Todd was filling out the paperwork, this small conversation took place. Me: "Hi sir, how are you today? What brings you in?" Todd: "Well, you see, I haven't been feeling well. I'm having difficulty breathing in and out of my nose and feel congested in my chest." Me: "I'm so sorry to hear that. Can I ask, why do you have a service dog?" We are legally allowed to ask this question due to guidelines under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Todd: "Oh, I was born with Usher syndrome." Me: "What is Usher syndrome?" Todd: "Usher syndrome is a condition where over time you progressively lose your ability to see or hear. In my case, it started when I left my mom. Yeah, because of my condition, I have also developed an anxiety disorder that Abby was trained to sense and help me calm down." Me: "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, sir. Please don't hesitate to call or ask us for help filling out any of the paperwork." Todd: "Oh, thank you, but that won't be necessary. I can see a little, but some things are blurry. But thanks for asking." Me: "Oh sure, sir. If you need any assistance, let us know. By the way, your dog is really sweet. What breed is she?" Todd: "Oh, Abby? She's a 3-year-old border collie, and she's been my best friend for years. I don't know what I would do without her. I've raised her since she was a pup." Me: "Oh, how sweet. Well, I best be getting back to work. I'll be seeing you and Miss Abby. I ruffle the pup's collar in just a minute. Let me or Nicole know if you need anything." We part ways briefly to go get the room ready for Todd and Abby. That's when we hear the door chime, indicating that another visitor has entered the facility. Per Nicole, she introduced our new visitor, let's call her Karen. This woman resembled a version of Kirstie Alley, handed her the necessary paperwork, and Karen went to sit down only a few seats away from Todd. Todd got up to hand Nicole the paperwork he had filled out. Abby perked up and helped Todd across the room. Karen, apparently not fond of this, kept grunting and throwing unfriendly looks in Todd and Abby's direction. Todd and Abby took their seat and waited for myself and the medical assistant to bring them to the back. Karen got up and approached Nicole. "Karen, here you go." Hands back the clipboard with the paperwork. Nicole: "Ma'am, I'm so sorry, but I noticed you haven't completed your paperwork. Is there something I could help you with?" Karen: "No, I don't feel comfortable in here." Nicole: "I'm sorry to hear that. Can I ask how I can make you feel more welcome?" Karen: Why, yes, you can start by removing that filthy flea bag. Nicole, ma'am, I'm sorry, but that is something I cannot do. Karen, why not? It's unsanitary to have a filthy animal in a sterile field. That dog doesn't belong in here. Just then, poor Abby perked her ears up as she heard an ambulance pass by the clinic with its siren blaring and began to howl. Karen, oh, be quiet, you filthy flea bag. She screeched at the dog. Be quiet, you silly mutt. Todd, I'm so sorry. Shush, Abby. He pulled on her lead and tried to settle her down. She doesn't often do this. Karen, nonsense. That mangy mutt probably isn't even a real service dog. Probably just bought the vest online. Liar. Nicole, ma'am, I'm sorry, but you cannot approach our other patients or their service animals. This dog is a service dog for this patient. Please lower your voice. It may disturb the other patients in the office. Tries to redirect. Karen, would you like my help filling out your paperwork so you can be seen by the provider? Karen, no, I want that dog removed and to speak to your provider. Nicole placed a brief call to the nurse station in the back, requesting that I come to the front, giving a brief indication that there was an urgent matter. I got up and went to the front where I met our Karen. Me, hi ma'am, how are you doing today? Karen, not so good. Honey, you see, I came in here because I am experiencing a lady issue, and this animal keeps making inappropriate noises and stinks. I've asked your receptionist to do her job and remove that dog, and she refuses to kick that young man and his mutt out. It's just not okay. Me, oh, well, I'm so sorry to hear that. What noises are you hearing that you find inappropriate? Karen, it's howling, panting. It's just so unpleasant and unsanitary. Me, I'm sorry ma'am, but per the Americans with Disabilities Act, we cannot discriminate against people with disabilities or prevent them from using a service animal. Karen, what? He's mistreating that animal. How can you people be so cruel and disgusting? You'll pay for this. She wagged her finger at Todd. Me, ma'am, that is enough. You're going to have to calm down or I'll have to ask you to leave. There is no need for name-calling or escalating this matter. The dog is a service animal and is here to assist his owner with daily tasks. Now, if you would still like to be seen by myself or my provider, I can take you to the back and have you wait in an exam room. Karen, really? I want to see that dog's papers. She approached Todd with her hand out, demanding his service dog registration papers. Me, ma'am? I stepped between her and Todd to prevent her from getting too close. That is not necessary. And you are not allowed to ask anyone for proof of identification or medical necessity. I think it's best that you find another physician's group to care for you, as we won't be able to help you today. Karen, how dare you? Why can't you see me? Why do I have to leave? That person and his dog should be the ones to leave. I demand you remove them now. Me, ma'am, I've asked you to stop yelling. I'm sorry, but I will not be able to treat you today as you're acting inappropriately and causing a disturbance. Could you please leave? Karen, be quiet. I can say and do whatever I want to. And I will not leave until I am seen and that person and his dog are kicked out. While my back and attention were focused on Karen, Abby had gotten up and was alerting to her owner's signs of distress. All of Karen's yelling had triggered a panic episode in Todd. That's when Todd stood up, grasped Abby's lead, and collapsed to the floor, brushing against one of the chairs in the waiting room as he went down. I quickly turned around and rushed to Todd's side, shouting to Nicole to call the medical assistant and the other registered nurse. Karen, oh please, he's faking it, you silly fool. She scoffed and approached Todd, even going so far as to lightly kick his boot to try to get him to move. Nicole returned with the medical assistant and our other nurse. While the three of us attended to Todd, Nicole calmly asked Karen to step back. Karen, why should I have to step back? He's pretending. Get that dog out of here. I told you this place was no place for an animal. Me, that's enough. In that moment, I snapped not my finest hour, but I was panicked and deeply frustrated by this woman's behavior. The entire waiting room fell silent. This was one of the rare occasions I had ever lost my composure. I called over my shoulder for Nicole to phone the authorities and an ambulance immediately. With the help of the registered nurse, I positioned Todd flat on his back. I checked his airway, then ran my fingers along the back of his neck and head to feel for any swelling or bleeding. I pulled out my stethoscope and checked Todd's heart and lungs. When he didn't respond to voice commands, I took my ophthalmoscope from my scrub jacket pocket and checked his pupils. I then asked the registered nurse to take his blood pressure and use the pulse oximeter to monitor his oxygen levels. I directed the medical assistant to start an intravenous line. I didn't believe the situation was life-threatening, but I wasn't going to risk it, especially considering Todd had already reported difficulty breathing, and our office didn't have the necessary emergency equipment in case he went into cardiac arrest. It was the longest 20 minutes of my life. Eventually, an intravenous drip was started, and Todd was stabilized. He was placed on the gurney by the ambulance personnel and loaded into the back of the emergency vehicle. As the local authorities arrived with the ambulance, I turned to the officers and asked them to escort Karen from the premises. Karen, but you haven't even asked how I'm doing. Me, ma'am, you're fortunate. I'm not personally pressing charges against you for assaulting me, my staff, and that patient. You should be ashamed of yourself. Karen, nonsense. I did nothing wrong. You should be arrested for allowing that animal in here. Officer, that's enough. Please come with me, ma'am. Karen, but. The officer firmly escorted her out of the clinic. The clinic later filed for a trespassing order against Karen and ensured she was escorted from the building. We haven't seen or heard from her since. As for Todd, thanks to a daytime employee from the local emergency department, he received the necessary care. He was monitored overnight due to head trauma and cardiac arrhythmia, strictly as a precaution, and thankfully made a full recovery. When his family arrived at the hospital, his parents decided to press assault charges against Karen for her behavior and actions. I've remained in contact with their attorney, and I will provide updates if any further information becomes available. Story 5. So, I already posted one story featuring my entitled grandmother, where she stole the books I was about to sell, to stop me from going to conventions as a kid. But here's another one that took place a few months ago. So, for some information, I was living house to house with her, close to a small forested area with some meadows, etc. Nice place, and there was a cliff in the back of her house. Not like a huge one, but also not small. There is one neighbor on the other side of the cliff, and another house to house with grandmother. I hope it's not too chaotic to understand, but you need to know how close our houses are for me. We're to understand what danger she put us all in. Grandmother had one main way of using the cliff. She dumped most of her garbage there. Old stove, fridge, pile of branches, leaves, old destroyed furniture, etc. Believe me or not, but over the years, she managed to build up her own trash island that basically made a garden extension. My dad told her many times that it's not safe and we have to move it, but she didn't let us. And besides, she's so stubborn that after, she would just start it again. So, the pandemic came and my dad had to go on isolation due to his trip to England to see our family before the whole thing started. And here's the main story. One day when I was coming back from the market, I saw a black smoke that was coming from the neighborhood of our house. Then I saw one of our neighbors running towards me to tell me to go help with the fire. As you can guess, Trash Island started to burn pretty badly. There were our neighbors trying to do something, but of course not my grandmother. They told me that they knocked at the door, but nobody was answering, so they started to put the fire down on their own. I got scared that maybe something happened to her. She's unconscious while there is a fire in her yard or something. I started to jump and hit in her window. Suddenly, she opened to ask me what the hell I am doing. She literally had no idea about fire and just ignored people at the door. She gave us access to the water from her sink, but we couldn't extinguish it all due to poor availability to already falling from the cliff Trash Island. We were running from top to bottom of the hill with the heavy buckets to stop fire from spreading on trees and meadow. I decided to call the fire brigade. I know that it wasn't a super big fire after our actions, but I was on my own and scared that someone might get hurt or something. I believe I made the right decision, but my grandmother was really angry at me. Why? Because she knew it's illegal to throw out garbage in the forest area, especially that amount of it, and she knew that she would have to pay a fine. No thank you, no sorry, neither for me or neighbors. Literally no gratitude for everything we did, and the whole thing took us a few hours. Cool. Next time I will let you burn. Story 6. So, I'll start this off by saying that although my wife and I are firmly child-free, neither of us dislike children. Generally, if there are kids around, and they aren't screaming like banshees, we don't mind them. I also got along relatively well with most of my step-family, but my stepsister went full obsessive parent and turned out to be a pretty unpleasant person overall. She caused a lot of problems within her side of the family, especially when it came to her children. This slow burn began a full year and a half before my plan came into effect. Earlier that year, my dad quite sensibly suggested that, due to the size of our family Christmas party, we skip a generation when it came to gift giving. It would ease the financial strain as the extended family continued to grow. At the time, I was struggling with my business and athletic career, and my wife was working on her second master's degree. So, I suggested drawing names from a hat, but my dad wanted to spoil all his grandchildren. I said, "Fair enough. I'll chip in for our grandmother's cruise and buy gifts for my step-siblings, but don't expect anything extravagant." Dramatis personae for that Christmas party. Me, I was 28 years old at the time, a heavyweight mixed martial artist and strength coach. In other words, a small-time athlete working a day job to barely make rent, all while training full-time. The stepsister in her early 40s, an overbearing mother whose sense of identity centered entirely around her children. Her personality traits had become difficult to identify beyond that. Thing 1, my oldest niece, 12 years old. Imagine the most stereotypical self-absorbed teenager. You can then multiply that image by 1,000. Thing 2, my oldest nephew, 9 years old. A reminder that one is never too young to act like a bully. Stepbrother, 36 years old. Once a cool guy, he seemed to give up on life once he became a father. Years later, he would regain just enough motivation to end up physically assaulting his wife. Spawn 1, my stepbrother's daughter, 6 years old. A sweet and shy girl who was absolutely terrified of my presence. Honestly, the wisest one of the bunch. Spawn 2, my stepbrother's son, 7 years old. A generally kind boy who was, at this time, halfway through becoming a bully himself due to constantly being told to emulate Thing 2. Spawn 1 had brought along a handheld gaming console, and all the kids were crowding around to see or play it. Foolishly, I offered to loan them mine to help lighten the load. Spawn 1 agreed to share it with Thing 1, and Spawn 2 agreed to share with Thing 2. Having naively deprived myself of my one means to escape social obligations, I headed to the living room to acquire a much older method of dealing with unwanted interactions: alcohol. I hadn't even had time to pour a drink when my trained ear picked up, from the kids' room, the unmistakable sound of one human being pummeling another. I politely suggested to my brother that he might want to go have a look. But my brother, who hadn't shown real concern about anything in the past 7 years, waved it off, so I went to investigate myself. I walked in to find that Thing 2, for all his faults, was unfortunately talented. He was managing to hit, shove into a wall, and kick Spawn 2 all at the same time, while attempting to play my gaming console with his other hand. He had decided his turn started the moment I left the room. Meanwhile, Thing 1 had simply taken the console from Spawn 1, who now sat crying in the corner. I shouted for my stepsister, informing her that if she didn't get in there to break things up before I counted to 10, I would have a very serious conversation with them myself. She eventually turned up, separated the kids, and I retrieved my console. Instead of correcting Thing 2 for hitting others and being unwilling to share, she began berating Spawn 2, the child who had just been beaten, for not giving up the console and making her son look bad. Thing 1 simply let out a dramatic teenage sigh and tossed the other console into the arms of the still crying Spawn 2. I then politely excused myself from the party, thankful to whatever higher powers may exist that I didn't have to provide gifts for any of those rambunctious children. 6 months later, my brother called me, and the following conversation took place. Him: "Hey, while I really appreciated the gifts last year, you should really get something for the kids this year instead. Christmas is all about the children, after all." Me: "No, I show up to talk with you, Dad, and our grandmother. I really don't care about the kids." Him: "That's a mean thing to say about my kids. Don't you care about them?" Me: "You cared so much that at the last party, you couldn't even be bothered to break up a fight where your son was being beaten up." Him: "Thing 1 is a good kid. Our sister said he just had a bad day." Me: "He was literally attacking your child. You didn't post pictures on social media for a week because of the bruises. If Thing 1 were an adult and had a bad day like that, I'd have had a serious talk with him and peacefully convinced him to lie down until the authorities arrived." Him: "Well, our stepsister and I were talking, and we think you should buy stuff for the kids next year instead of for us." Me: "Well, I'm happy not to buy you anything, but I'm not getting anything for our sister's children, especially when she actively encourages that kind of behavior." Him: "Well, if you're not going to get something for all the kids, you shouldn't get anything at all. It's not right if you don't treat them equally." Me: "Done." Now, I'm sure they wish it had been that simple, but it wasn't. And I certainly wouldn't be writing such a long-winded story if that were the payoff. Thanks for bearing with me so far. We're almost at the end. A few months later, about 2 weeks before Christmas, I received an email from my dad with links to various toys, mostly from toy stores that still existed at the time. I called him back to ask what it was about. The conversation went like this. Me: "Hey, what's up? I got your email. What's that all about?" Dad: "Those are gifts for the kids, Thing 1, Thing 2, and the 2 Spawns for Christmas." Me: "That's cool if you're getting them that. I'll see them open it when we're there." Dad: "No, those are for you to get them." Me: "I don't buy gifts for that generation, remember? I already sent you my contribution toward our grandmother's cruise." Dad: "You need to get stuff for the kids. Don't you want them to look up to you as their uncle?" Me: "Not really. Also, what about my life makes you think I'm a good role model? You'd be better off telling them to grow up to be rock stars." Dad: "That's not the point. Christmas is about the children. If you don't get them this stuff, I won't put your name on the card for our grandmother." Me: "That's pretty unfair, considering I've already paid into that." Dad: "So are you going to get the stuff or not?" Me: "Well, I guess my name isn't going on the card then. This list would cost me more than a month's rent, so you can take this list and—" He cut me off before I could say something more direct. "Dad, calm down. This is what they want." Me: "I'll get them a small gift, but I'm not going into debt for this." Dad: "Fine. Just make it something they'll enjoy." Me: "If what I get doesn't put a giant smile on each and every one of their faces, I'll buy you dinner at a steakhouse of your choosing." Dad: "That's the spirit. Talk to you later." So, Christmas rolls around, and my wife and I show up with not just 1, but 4 gifts for each of the little ones, all beautifully wrapped. My dad, quite correctly, assumed most of it came from a discount store. Still, seeing how nicely wrapped everything was, he gave me a nod of approval as I placed the packages under the tree. My wife and I then suggested that, since we brought multiple gifts for each child, they could each open one before dinner. That way, they'd have something to keep them occupied while waiting. Their parents readily agreed. Of course, after all, it gave them even more reason to ignore their children and instead talk about them. So, they sent us off to hand out the presents. My stepsister looked especially smug, no doubt assuming she had pressured me into giving in. As the kids began to unwrap their gifts, I got the camera ready while my wife grabbed our coats. I stuck around just long enough to capture a snapshot of the big grins that spread across each of the kids' faces the moment they saw what was inside. Less than a minute later, the first blast of the air horn thing two's gift rang out loudly through the hallway, clear enough for my wife and I to hear as we made our way to the elevator. I have no idea how much of the bulk pack of silly strings Spawn 1's gift, or the 36 rainbow packs of off-brand permanent markers Spawn 2's gift ended up on the walls, but I do know that the place was repainted the next month. As for the pile of slap-on bracelets we got for Thing 1, whether they ended up on the wrists and legs of the parents as they tried to contain the chaos remains a mystery. But I like to think every one of them was styled in full 80s fashion before Boxing Day rolled around. I may never know if they opened the rest of their presents. After all, everyone got a copy of each of the other's gifts, just to be fair. That included a variety of mildly inappropriate, but harmless temporary tattoos, of course. In the chaos, none of them noticed when my wife and I left. I'm sure they eventually did notice the pretty gold envelope addressed to the parents on the tree. Inside was a beautifully designed card, blank except for one handwritten message. This was a warning shot from off the top of my head. I've got a whole year to get creative for next time. Merry Christmas. E. I never bought anyone that steak dinner, but I did enjoy several more Christmases with my dad and grandmother until they passed. After that, I stopped attending gatherings with that side of the family altogether. No one ever mentioned that incident again. No one ever brought up gifts for the kids again. And I, for one, considered that a win.